Hey members, today's video is going to be about some of the techniques that you can use to choose the most appropriate vocabulary word for these specific kind of problems which are going to be present on the SAT test. This particular problem is what you'll find in the critical reading section of the SAT test, right? Okay, so I'm going to quickly read it first before saying anything about it. Although he is blank about the problems that still confront blacks in ballet, Mitchell nevertheless is optimistic about the future, especially that of his own dance company. Now, as you can see, I've made a few notes beforehand within the passage, right? And let's go ahead and discuss that first, right? So, first thing we want to look at here is how we begin the passage. The passage is we start the passage with the conjunction although. Now, right off the bat, you can think of although kind of as being similar to but, right? Which is also a conjunction. And the purpose of conjunctions are to combine two separate clauses, right? That have some kind of correlation, some kind of relationship, right? In this instance, we're using although, which is a conjunction that is used to connote contrast, right? There's a connotation of something being of two contrasting ideas whenever you have the conjunction although, which is why I say you can think of it as but, right? The next thing we talk about is the adverb nevertheless, right? Now, nevertheless is the same thing as saying in spite of something, right? Despite something, another action will occur, not being affected by the first action that happened, right? That's kind of what you can think of as nevertheless, the way its function is. That's the connotation for nevertheless. And like I said, that's an adverb. And what the job of an adverb is to modify a verb. And now this particular adverb is modifying the subject of this clause, which is Mitchell. He's a person, right? Okay, it's the conjugated form of be, right? Now, I don't know about you, but when I first read this, I noticed that actually nevertheless is superfluous in this passage. You don't really need it because you already got the idea that if you start the sentence with the conjunction although, if you understand what although means, you will know that there will be two of the clauses in here. They're going to be contrasting ideas. You can think of it as positive and negative, right? So nevertheless is basically doing the same function as although is, right? I guess this passage is a little wordy, right? Now let's move on to some of our choices, right? A, we have hopeful. B, we have uninformed. C, abstract. D, realistic. And E, unconcerned. Now you can see above each one of these, I've also written some. Maybe you can't see. I'm sorry. I wrote in a very light color, so I'll go ahead and go over that in blue. The first one is hopeful. And hopeful, to be hopeful, a synonym. It's not really a synonym because it's not a single word, but it's to be hopeful is to have trust in something. That trust that something will happen. Right. Next one is B, uninformed. Now the synonym that I chose for uninformed was ignorant, right? Uninformed means you don't know something. If you don't know something, you're ignorant about that thing. Right? C is abstract, and the synonym that I chose there was theoretical, right? If something is abstract, it's theoretical. It works in theory, right? It's not always applicable to real life, right? Next one is realistic, and I actually have two synonyms for this one because this one, depending on the context in which you use this word, the synonym will be different, the meaning might be different. So the first one is cognizant. And cognizant is just really kind of another word for being aware. Now, how is realistic the same as being cognizant? Well, if you're aware of something, you're cognizant of something, then that thing that you are aware or cognizant of will be kind of realistic because it will be real in the way that you are aware of it being there, right? So to speak. Right, and the other one I had was accurate. If something is realistic, it's also accurate. Why is it accurate? Because things that are real are accurate, right? Quite simple. It's just as simple as that, right? The last one we have is unconcerned. And if you're unconcerned, you show no concern for something. You show no concern for something, then you are apathetic, which is just a really kind of fancy way of saying you don't care, right? Now let's run all of these through the blank in our passage, right? Let's start with A. Although he is hopeful about the problems that still confront blacks in ballet, Mitchell is nevertheless optimistic about the future, especially that of his own dance company. Now there are a couple problems with this one. The first problem that we have is a problem of having the clauses agree in juxtaposition with the conjunction although. Like we said, when we use although, we need to have contrary ideas on either side of the comma. This is where the clause is split, right? One of these has to be kind of negative in a way, and the other one has to be positive in a way. The way we can determine which one is positive is quite simply by looking at this adjective, optimistic. If you're optimistic about something, you're positive about something, you're hopeful that something will happen. Now, it doesn't make sense if we're using although, and we know that in order to use although, we need to have two contrasting ideas. Well, that's not a contrast here. Hopeful and optimistic are both synonyms of each other, so it doesn't work. So we can go ahead and cancel that out. Okay. The next one is B, uninformed. Let's just run it through. Although he is uninformed about the problems that still confront blacks in ballet, Mitchell nevertheless is optimistic about the future, especially that of his own dance company, right? Now, this doesn't make sense. He's ignorant about the problems that still confront blacks in ballet. Well, there's a problem with that. If he has his own dance company, would it make sense for him to be ignorant about issues that face blacks in ballet? Because obviously we can discern, we can kind of infer that if we're talking about blacks in ballet and we have the subject Mitchell, we can assume that he is also black. Otherwise, he probably won't be concerned about the problems facing blacks in ballet, quite realistically, right? So that doesn't make sense for him to be ignorant about problems that are facing his people when he has his own dance company, right? That just doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit in with the whole theme of the passage. Okay, let's run through abstract, right? Although he is abstract about the problems that still confront blacks in ballet, Mitchell nevertheless is optimistic about the future, especially that of his own dance company. Now, one thing we need to note about the adjective abstract, something has to be abstract. Usually in speech and in written English, something that is abstract is usually an inanimate object. So something is abstract, not someone is abstract. That really doesn't make sense for an animate object or a living person to be abstract. They can be abstract in their way of thinking, in which you need to explain the way in which they are abstract, right? But in this context, abstract doesn't really make sense because this would mean that he is abstract, an abstract person, a theoretical person. Theoretical in what? In thinking, but that's not what it says. So we can go ahead and cancel that out too. Right? Next one, realistic, cognizant and accurate, aware of something, right? Although he is realistic about the problems that still confront blacks in ballet, Mitchell nevertheless is optimistic about the future, especially that of his own dance company. Now, right off the bat, compared to the others that we've already run through here, this one makes more sense, right? Why is that, right? So we said optimistic was kind of, let me use another color. Optimistic was kind of a positive adjective. And why do we remember why we're talking about that whole relation of positive and negative was frankly because we started the sentence with although, which is a conjunction that denotes some kind of contrast, right? So we have optimistic is positive, and we said, so if this side of the comma is positive, that must mean that this side has to be negative. Well, not so much. Realistic is more kind of a neutral term. It's not negative. If you're a realistic person, maybe some people might think of that as negative, but others might say, no, I'm a realist because I'm aware of what's real and what's true, what real life is, right? So this is not really, I know I said there's kind of a positive negative relationship, but in a matter of speaking, when using realistic, it's usually kind of a neutral thing, right? It's not a positive or negative. But actually, this is the one that fits the best in our sentence, right? So he wouldn't be an optimist and he wouldn't be a pessimist. He's just a realist, right? That's why we have those two. Optimist is positive, pessimist is negative, and the realist is in the middle. It's the neutral one, okay? So he's realistic about the problems that still confront blacks in ballet. As we discussed earlier, he must be a black man and he must have a black ballet dance company. Otherwise, it would make no sense for him to be, concerned about any of these issues facing blacks in ballet, right? So it makes sense for him to be realistic about the problems. He knows about the problems that black dancers face in ballet, but despite these problems, nevertheless, in the face of these problems, he is still optimistic, right? And that also lets us know the use of nevertheless in this passage, even though really you can write this without using nevertheless. Right? Just for fun, let's run E through here, apathetic. We already know realistic is the right answer, but for the sake of argument, let's say unconcerned. Although he is unconcerned about the problems that still confront blacks in ballet, okay, right there we can stop. Like we just said, he must be black and he must have a black dance company. So would it make any sense for him to be apathetic and not care about the issues facing his black dance troupe and black dancers in ballet? No, that doesn't make sense. So we can go ahead. We already know that the correct answer is D. All right. So I just wanted to really quickly run through the kind of problems that you'll see in the critical reading part of the SAT. Look out for more SAT videos. And as usual, if you like it, leave me a comment or contact me at jeteducate@gmail.com. Thanks, guys.